stone and wood. The rings would work like hoops on...
Remember last time we talked about this kind of stuff, the Crusaders were running through, the Crusades were going full force, and it was making the Italian city-states super rich. They were becoming very rich. Also, I'm skipping a whole great patch of unknown history about the Northmen. The Northmen came, they conquered England in 1076, Battle of Hastings. France, the Holy Roman Empire, gave them the whole big chunk of the prime real estate in France called Normandy today. They went around to the Gulf of Gibraltar and conquered southern Italy. They threatened Constantinople from the east. They came down through Russia, through the rivers, the Dnieper and the Danube, and they set up principalities, which became the modern Russian state. Those princes used to invade what they called the hinterland. The word Ukraine, I'm Ukrainian, means frontier. So the Northmen would go into the frontier and collect slaves and bring them to the Islamic and Byzantine markets in Constantinople. That's where the word Slavic lands come from. So I'm skipping all the Northmen that are going on at this time. They're terrifying the Byzantines just as much as the Turkmen are around the year 1100 and 1200. But the Crusades, they got kind of out of hand, and after the Fourth Crusade, you probably realize actually attacked Constantinople, or it didn't attack it, it's by stealth, conquered Constantinople and took over the city for about 75 years, shipping all the goodies to Venice. So if you go to St. Mark's Square in Venice today, what you're looking at is the Byzantine world that existed in Constantinople. It was all shipped there in payment, in debt, for transporting the Crusaders back and forth. Well, in the midst of all this, Fibonacci, we'd stopped last week, had come back being educated in Al-Andalus, Spain. He was educated there, and he brought back the number 0 in the Arabic numerals, which the traders were using like crazy. They were using them like crazy. Florence, the city that you just saw, Brunelleschi, had banned it, but the traders basically ignored it. Now what's going to happen is that the number 0 in the Arabic system is going to infect the culture. And if you remember what I said happened in Hawaii, when they broke the kapu of the culture in around the year 1800, the whole society collapsed. Well, is that going to happen in the West? I'll leave for you to decide. I'll leave it for you to decide. But I think it's a strong factor that introducing that number system, when it was fully understood by the developing universities in these city-states, caused a crack in the culture, which resulted eventually, one of the primary causes, in the Reformation. That's what I'm going to talk about for today for a few minutes. But it started with Fibonacci. He was the one that brought it back, and you probably saw the rabbits. Here I've got his rabbits shown online, and the sequence is, you just add the previous two numbers, 1, 3, 5, and the really cool thing that Fibonacci did, it wasn't in the Dan Brown novel, but it's really cool, is if you take a series of Fibonacci sequences and divide them by each other sequentially, you get the digits of the golden mean. The 1 plus the square root of 5 over 2 that the Greeks thought of. If you take the Fibonacci sequence and offset it by 1 and divide by the numbers, the decimal places map out the sequences of the golden mean. So that's what Fibonacci was really proud of. He published a book, and that book became widespread, that the Fibonacci sequence converged to the golden mean. They didn't know at the time that Fibonacci sequence is all over. It's in the spiral galaxies. It's in the shell. It's in how the sunflower seeds are arranged in the pattern around the center. It's how the plants' leaves are arranged as they travel around the stem. They're all done in Fibonacci sequences. So we're still discovering, and I thank Dan Brown for bringing up some of the more, even the Fibonacci sequences in modern man, as he puts on weight, you can see that's, well, anyway, that's supposed to be the golden mean that existed. This is a very interesting Fibonacci sequence, and for your quiz that's due tomorrow, here's another 5 points for you. Take a look at this take a look at this rectangle that I've got shown here. Now, every May I go to my daughter's class and give an engineering pitch to the students there, and I give them this. I think the word is out because they usually know the answer to it. But if you take these pieces of a rectangle, and she actually has the pieces that she distributes to the students in her math class. So she distributes these pieces and they line them up. And if you take this piece here and rotate it counterclockwise 90 degrees, it would fit right nicely right there. And then you take the yellow piece and rotate it counterclockwise 90 degrees, and it'll fit right nicely right there. And then move these triangles here and here. They fit really nice on your desks. But if you look at the dimensions, the area of this top one is 8 by 8, 64, and the area of the bottom one is 13 by 5, it's 65. So the question is, where did the 64 equal 65 because of this? So I challenge you to tell me what happened here, and if you can think of it, just throw it onto your back of your quiz or your readiness check, and I'll give you another 5 points. So you're going to have 15 extra points for the readiness check. This is going to be 5 of them right here, okay? 5 are on one of the videos that what happened. It's also in the musical scale. Fibonacci's in the musical scale, and people design buildings, spiral staircases using Fibonacci sequence as you go up or down, and even comic strips. This guy suspects that his football count is a Fibonacci sequence. He says you're going to give it away to the opposition because everybody knows that. So it's even in the comic strips sometimes. I don't think many people got that comic strip when I watched it. Last week I said that these wealthy city-states were competing with each other by making bigger churches and higher domes. Well, they had built this church in Florence, except there was no dome on it. Nobody could build a dome. So they had a contest. They had a, show up with your design and we'll fund you. And Brunelleschi showed up with his design and said how it would work, and that's where those 8s came in, all the octagons came in from his proposal. And they said, okay, well, show us how you're going to do it. And he said, well, I don't know how I'm going to do it yet. And I wouldn't show you anyway, because if I showed you, my competitors would come in with a lower bid. So they knew he was a little crazy. We're pretty sure that Brunelleschi, because he was an artist, he was a sculptor, a painter, an architect, a builder. He actually laid the bricks with the other bricklayers on the inside of that dome. He risked his life in there. He was probably what we'd call mentally ill today. Probably bipolar. Certainly autistic at least, but bipolar is my guess. So they knew he was a little off, and for some reason, we don't know why, they don't have these records, they gave him the bid without having any plans. And we don't have the plans today. So we think he kind of maybe drew it on the floor when he was building his dome. But if you look at the top of the dome and the way those 8s come in, it converges to 0. That had not been done before. There had been no convergence of stress to a 0 point before. And so we suspect, scholars suspect, that he had read Fibonacci, he had incorporated the Arabic numerals into his math, and had developed math to the point where he could visualize constructions like this that would last, it would not collapse on themselves. And he built it showing that. So he became pretty well known in the universities. He traveled widely lecturing on this, but that wasn't what sparked the Reformation. What sparked the Reformation, and I'm talking about spark, I'm talking well before Martin Luther. We're talking 80, 90 years before Luther or any of the other people normally associated with the Reformation. What sparked it was this painting. This painting, if you look at all the old art in the old churches, it's all two-dimensional. They got saints with halos and two-dimensional people, very two-dimensional, beautiful art, beautiful icons, but two-dimensional. But look at what Brunelleschi did. He went to the University of Florence, and he showed them this painting. Now, there were a bunch of cardinals. Most of the educated people at the time were cardinals. Cardinals had been, the office of the cardinal started around the millennium, the first millennium, so that the emperors weren't dictating who the pope was. So they had these cardinals running around, and the more educated ones lived in the universities. And Brunelleschi unfolded this and showed it to the educated cardinals there. And one cardinal in particular, his name was Nicholas de Cusa, German cardinal. He looked at that and he said, amazingly, that means the Earth's not the center of the universe. Because infinity converges on the point in the drawing, and that point is arbitrary. I can take that point anywhere. So infinity converges to zero at arbitrary points in the universe. Therefore, the Earth is not the center of the universe. Wow. I don't know how he just thought that right there, and he started writing books. He wrote books, he wrote papers. We still have them. We still have Nicholas de Cusa's works. I've got a book of his in my shelf at home. It's fantastic. I mean, he's obviously a genius, way ahead of his time. And he didn't get in trouble for saying that because it's like 1430. Martin Luther is 60 years away. So all these cardinals are publishing these things about the Earth possibly not being the center of the universe because of this painting of Brunelleschi and how he's using zero. Well, to kind of put a cap on this, you probably know the rest of the story. Towards the end of the 1500s, politics started to come into this. A monk, a Polish monk, who was he believed in, like Newton, in alchemy. His name was Copernicus. And he got a hold of de Cusa's writings. And he said, oh, this is interesting. And he had astronomy as a hobby, astrology. He was an astrologer to help his patients with astrology. But he dabbled in astronomy. So he said, well, what would happen if de Cusa was right? So he wrote a paper. And we all know the result of that paper on the heavens. He didn't publish it until he was on his deathbed, because by the time he had written his writings, word had gotten out that these people were saying the Earth wasn't the center. It threw all of Greek thought into chaos. And so it was becoming frowned upon but not yet banned. And so Copernicus realized that. His friend was the Pope, so he didn't publish it until he died. Also, it wasn't accurate. The Ptolemy universe that had been for ages was still more accurate than Copernicus. Do you know why? Why was Copernicus' system less accurate than the old one? Does anybody remember why? Because Copernicus used circles for the orbits. Okay? So if you use circles, you get less. Now, the man who corrected that really did spark the Reformation. He was in like 1515, about the time of Luther, and things were by now flying. Fur was flying by this time. His name was Kepler. So Hans Kepler was the first one to develop the laws of planetary motion based on the work of Copernicus, and he bent them into ellipses and got a better fit than Ptolemy, and he threw the whole universe the whole known universe at the time into chaos.